So Smile was a huge breakout hit in 2022. In particular, that year for horror was pretty stacked. And Smile comes
Mm.
along out of nowhere. This new original concept from director and writer Parker Finn, and it takes over. It comes out in the summertime of 2022, and quickly, due to word of mouth and positive reactions and feedback, it became the highest grossing horror movie of that year, which is pretty phenomenal. I also remember that film had a pretty impressive marketing campaign as well, a lot of marketing
Mhm.
and viral things that were associated with that. But obviously, just due to the success of that original film, which grossed north of $200 million at the global box office, Paramount Pictures decided to go ahead and smartly and intelligently greenlight a sequel. And they got back director and writer Parker Finn to come back for the sequel, but it has an entirely new cast, and you would pretty much know why if you've seen the first Smile. But this one more so centers on Naomi Scott's character, who's a pop star who begins to experience these really disturbing psychological events. And again, if you've seen the original Smile, you know sort of what carries on from the events of that film into this film. But this is definitely, I think, one of the more anticipated horror movies of the year, just considering the success of that first movie and now rolling right into the second one that comes out a little bit over 2 years later. So with all of that out the way, we've gotten a chance to go see this movie, so we're going to talk about it here. So I will pass it to you, man. What did you think about Smile 2?
Man, with all the things you just said, I was just super excited, I think, to see this movie. The first Smile comes out, and it's just a good time in the movies, part of this really good horror year we're having. And so, coming to the theater to see Smile 2, I was like, okay, now what do we have? What are we going to do different? How are we going to, it's going to be better? And before I seen this movie, I heard from a lot of people actually, I was like, man, I really like Smile 2 better than the first one, this and that. I was like, I have to see for myself. And I think after watching it, I don't know if I feel like it's better. I might feel like it's actually kind of the same for me in a good way, though, not necessarily good or bad. It's just like, I still enjoyed that experience, but kind of in some ways for different reasons. I think Smile 2 comes in and they maintain a lot of the same beats that they have in the first one, but as you said, Naomi Scott is playing a star in this, and because of that, there are different, I guess, nuances and things that comes with uh I guess her trauma, right? Like Smile's about trauma, kind of, and so her trauma is different than the trauma that was happening in the first Smile, and so there are different, really cool, I think, psychological things that they can play with in this film that they weren't able to play with in the first one. What I like about the first one is how intimate it was, and even by the ending, how intimate it stayed. In the nature of this one just wasn't that completely. I think I was impressed by how intimate it still was in those first couple acts, but by the end it goes a little crazy for me. I was like, whoa, there's a lot happening very fast here. But it left me in a very interesting place, I'll say that. I was like, whoa, that's a very interesting place to leave off. I wonder where we're going to go from here. I can't wait to see what they potentially do with a Smile 3. Some of the scares are fine here. I think there was a couple times I could tell CGI was being used. Also, I think some of the scares were a little cheap, but I like Naomi Scott's performance so much, and I think what she was giving to the film was the horror for me. The thing she was experiencing, the thing that she was going through, and I think she conveyed that really well on screen. I think overall, this still ended up being a very solid movie for what it was. Man, I enjoyed this film. I think I understand why everyone is saying why I think why they enjoyed it more than Smile One, but I just don't think I'm in that camp. But I still had a good time with this movie, and I still think it's a win for the Smile franchise.
I was very much looking forward to Smile 2 because Smile from 2022 was one of my favorite horror movies of that year. And it was a really impressive year. There was some strong stuff that came out at that particular time, but just seeing how inventive they were with the concept, sort of taking something that had been done before, but changing it up a little bit, and just kind of noticing the vision that Parker Finn as a filmmaker had, just a very keen eye for camera angles and cinematography and sound design. Like, he definitely seemed ahead of his years in terms of just being able to execute upon that stuff. So just from like a technicality standpoint, I was really thoroughly impressed by Smile, and all of that stuff carries over into this movie. Just from like a technical standpoint, you can tell Parker Finn, he just levels up to another degree. He has more
Yeah.
money, more resources here. The camera angles are all over the place in a good way. There's Dutch angles, there's angles that are upside down that are meant to really kind of throw you off your equilibrium. Just this constant sense of you can't relax or rest because everything that's happening in the movie, there's just such a forward momentum, and there's always just an unpredictability towards, I think if you've seen this movie, just the question of what's real and what's not. and you constantly have to ask yourself, just like, is this even like happening for real in real life right now, or is this all in somebody's head? And I think that that just adds to great tension within the film, because at the moment you decide to get comfortable, the rug
Mhm.
gets snatched from underneath you. And I think that that stuff was really, really good. But the best thing about this movie for me personally is Naomi Scott. Her performance is just incredible. Watching her just completely crash out for 2 hours was
Yep.
a sight to see, because she was just losing it. I think even more so than what we saw Sosie Bacon do in the first one. Like
Mhm.
this one, you really felt, I think, for the protagonist here, just because she did have a history of really, really significant issues.
Mhm.
There's a bit of history with substance abuse related to her character, and they absolutely lean into that. And I think that that just adds a lot of layers and depth to what she went through in this movie. But when you just kind of see it all unfold against the backdrop of her being a pop star and being this very, very famous person, that's a completely different style and tone than what the first one had to strike. Because the first
Yeah.
one, Sosie Bacon's character is a therapist, so it is smaller and intimate. And I think that this one
Mhm.
goes to a much larger canvas. And I wondered the whole time, like watching it, like, well, why did they take it this direction? Why did they go for
Mhm.
something that's a lot more massive and large scale and a really huge public persona? By the end of the movie, that answer becomes very, very clear, without getting into it. But it certainly was done with a very, very intentional reason. And as you said, I'm super excited for Smile 3. But this one I do think is really, really on par with the first film, which doesn't happen often within the horror genre. You know, to
Yeah.
say something can be on the same level playing field, or in some people's eyes even surpass that first one, that's quite an
Mhm.
achievement. So we're in really good hands so far with these first two films. And Parker Finn, I think, if he does come back for the third one, which I assume he would, I'm super curious to see where it all goes, and if they intend to conclude this or wrap it up as a trilogy. I'm not sure, but the stakes have certainly been raised. Last thing I'll say, Voss Water had a huge plug in this movie.
Oh man.
I mean, that is product placement out the ass, but it was well done. Very, very well done,
Mhm.
because you didn't really go more than probably 3 or 4 scenes without seeing a Voss water bottle in this movie. But it does add to the story and add to what's
It
happening
does.
within the movie. But overall, I had a really, really good time with Smile 2. And again, as I said, super excited for Smile 3. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new horror film, Smile 2. If you've checked this out this past weekend, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.